this, Danny. Forever and ever and ever.
The Shining is hypnotic. I don't even say I like it. I can't help watching it. It's one of those movies where you know you're in for some.
The making of The Shining was very much influenced by the same kind of thinking as the making of Clockwork Orange. That Kubrick saw that he was being outpaced in certain areas. Other people were doing things better than him, and he wanted to come in and do something so great that they would be blown out of the water.
Well, that just happens to be exactly what I'm looking for.
Now, Kubrick said you shouldn't worry too much about your successes, you should worry about your failures. Because your failures mean that you're limited in your opportunities for the future. Barry Lyndon is a fabulous film, but unfortunately it didn't make that much money. So he couldn't, after Barry Lyndon, make Napoleon, his dream project. So he had to find a project that would perhaps make him money.
For a long time he'd been interested in not horror stories, but sort of gothic stories, stories that were somewhat sinister, stories that had a slightly mystical, ghostly element.
I don't want to go there, Mrs. Torrance.
Well, how come you don't want to go?
I just don't.
He'd been particularly influenced by a story by Stephen Crane called The Blue Hotel, which he'd read by an American writer named Diane Johnson, called The Shadow Knows, and asked her to adapt the King novel.
He was very literary, and as a serious artist, his understanding was very much more at the thematic and psychological and human level than just wanting some visuals with people sneaking down halls with knives and stuff. He wanted it to make sense in real psychological terms. Just as the great horror tales do, they all have some underlying paradigm which can explain why they touch us or scare us.
When he bought the rights to this story, he knew already that he was going to change it drastically. And when he bought the rights, he reserved the right to do that. That's a very important part.
Stephen King's novel is unashamedly mystical. There are ghosts and horrors in this hotel. It is haunted because it's built on an old American Indian graveyard. Out in the gardens, there are these topiary animals made out of plants which get up and walk around and chase you and so on.
There was always a question about...
He didn't believe in set design. Why should I, he always said, why should I be so egomaniacal to think that of all the rooms that have already been made by all the great architects in the world, why would I suddenly come up with a new and better room? I'll just find either the piece of music that's been written over the last 150 years, or the room, or the shirt, or whatever it is. He just believed in getting the best of it and innovating within that.
The Overlook Hotel itself isn't, doesn't look like the house in the Amityville Horror. It isn't like a frightening house to look at. It doesn't look like the Bates Motel. It's a pretty lodge. But for a sustained chill, it's truly horrifying.
He did like the idea of the Indian graveyard. And because Irani had all these wonderful Indian motifs, we decided we'd go that route. And I suggested doing a model. So we started building these models to a big scale, 1/2 inch to the foot. And everything became three-dimensional to Stanley. Because we had these models, he worked out a formula where by using certain lighting, like if you used a 2K, that would transfer into so many candles. So he could work out exactly how much lighting he would require for those huge windows.
At this point, he was getting very preoccupied with moving camera as well. The Steadicam had just come in, and he was able to get Garrett Brown, the inventor of the Steadicam, to come and work on the film.
It is a way of disconnecting a camera from the bloke who's holding it. In the simplest possible terms. People are always in motion. Cameras need to be immune to that motion. The result is you, the ever-moving guy, can keep moving, and the camera has a separate kind of motion. Whatever you want for it, you can do.
On The Shining, since he built this whole hotel in an English studio, he could race along these corridors. Nobody liked the topiary animals in the book. First of all, they thought they're hard to do. And this was before CGI was really around. You know, now, of course, simplest thing in the world. Also, the film was evolving into a much more psychoanalytical frame of mind. And Kubrick, all his life, was a game player. For a while, he earned a kind of living playing chess for money in New York as a young man. He was a puzzle solver. And he also had a model of the maze that he kept in his office, and he would work on ways to move the people around. And the Steadicam, of course, was perfect for that.
Look out.
We used an extremely wide lens called a 9.8, and we're rigorous about keeping it level. Because if I tilted that lens at all, it just looked totally unreal. The result was that those boxwoods, or whatever they were, looked about 12 feet tall, when in fact they were probably maybe 8 feet, something like that.
I didn't think it's gonna be this big, did you? No?
There's one shot I'm still trying to figure out how they did, though. And that is basically our introduction to the maze, where Jack's looking at the model, and then it cuts to like this high angle of the maze, and you see them walking through there. It feels too high to be a crane shot. It's pretty high up.
I was present when they did that. They shot the model from a scaffold at the appropriate height, and then they built one center section of the maze next to an apartment block.
Stanley worked all that out. We actually built a rostrum, and we cantilevered this out so we could get the camera right clear of the edge, vertically shooting down to the ground. And to my amazement, Stanley actually climbed out and looked through the camera. And I don't think he realised he was out that far in space. So we shot that.
And they were able to carve out just the little bit they shot from the apartment and superimpose it over the shot of the model.
It removes the main problem for the actor, which is pressure. You know, he's not going to stop until it's exactly the way he wants it, right, wrong, or indifferent. It is going to be right.
It's his mother. She interferes.
Jack would give Stanley, in effect, the entire smorgasbord of performance, from catatonic to hysterical. He'd give him every gradation all the way up.
Stanley's investment in a film was investment in time. We had a very frugal operation, usually. Few people, small crews, but we took a long time.
It was a way of getting a lot of material so that second thoughts didn't get lost.
You spend all this time and money preparing and getting to the actual moment of filming and then rush through the filming. He just felt that that was backwards, that he'd spent 5 years preparing this picture. He'd spent months and months building the sets. And now it comes to this moment, he's going to do 60, 70 tries. Just see what happens, even if take 5 is a terrific one.
Just give me one more chance.
The editor told me, he said, I watch these all the time. I could see it happening. He said, first of all, the actor would give a pretty basic, his best shot. And then Kubrick would say, okay, go again, and he'd do it a little more extravagantly. And then he'd hit about 12 or 14 takes in, he'd start to get tired. So he'd start to save himself. And then Kubrick would...
That you would be making something that you'd be proud of and that would last, and that's really all the rest of it's about. I mean, I look at him as as from personal contact as well as from what I know from others, as a man who really succeeded.
He used cinema to reflect what the world or society was thinking and fearing and experiencing at that particular time. So it's completely contemporary. Quite remarkable. He's a remarkable filmmaker. That's one of the things I love about Kubrick as a filmmaker. He didn't want people to forget about the movie. He spent a lot of his life making it. He wants people to